in a certain country, with the strength of a single hero, the Demon Lord was defeated. Seizing the opportunity, the human army captured the Demon Lord's castle, and from then on, humans no longer had to fear the Demon Lord. However, to prevent humans from getting ahead, the demon race organized a grand assembly to find a candidate for the vacant Demon Lord position. One of the 4 heavenly kings, Vermi, took responsibility for this assembly, with Han as the deputy in charge. After the recent preliminary round, there were many candidates who seemed special and promised to be even stronger than the defeated former Demon Lord. Han collected images from the recent preliminary round, and the notable character was Helk, who was a human hero. Hearing this, Vermi visibly panicked, wondering why a human was allowed to compete. Due to the non-discrimination rule, and because Helk had declared that he hated humanity and wanted to exterminate them, he was allowed to participate. However, Vermi believed this was an act and feared that if they didn't do something, they would all be in danger. Han wasn't worried because Helk had signed a contract that prevented contestants from harming anyone outside the competition and vice versa. Vermi was concerned that Helk wanted to use the contract to harm all the potential Demon Lord candidates, but Helk fought fairly and respected his opponents. Vermi still believed that no one would accept a human as the Demon Lord, but everyone who watched the competition acknowledged him. Vermi thought they were all too ignorant, losing to humans time and time again, and she was so angry that she blew up the castle. Now she had no way to eliminate Helk because he had reached level 99, while the 4 heavenly kings like herself hadn't even surpassed level 80. She was at a loss, unable to think of a solution. So Han suggested forcing Helk to play a card tower building game, but cheating by giving him slippery cards. Vermi wasn't sure this method would work, so Han promised to find any possible way. The next day, Vermi's subordinate staff from the intelligence department went to gather information about the hero Helk. Meanwhile, Vermi went to watch the card tower building competition as previously discussed. This competition only had 10 spots to advance, so those without talent in this area were out of luck. Helk struggled and couldn't build anything, so Vermi thought he would surely lose. However, after a while, Helk clapped his hands once and produced a strong gust of wind, blowing away others' towers and quickly building his own. Everyone thought Helk had broken the rules by obstructing others, but before Vermi could announce this, a young man named Ken stood up and argued that the competition wasn't just about building card towers, but also about defending one's own tower. This young man's interpretation was so elaborate that even Vermi hadn't thought of it. Everyone found it convincing and had their minds opened, but a girl named Hyuga saw through Ken's lie. So from a card stacking contest, everyone decided to turn it into a fight to destroy each other's card towers. Vermi thought Helk had intentionally staged this to make the contestants fight each other, but Han advised her not to overinterpret. Meanwhile, Ista had contacted her sister Ista through telepathy and informed her that she had found some information about Helk. Back at the competition, Vermi later organized other contests such as chess, which Helk won, and sculpture, which Helk also won. For the next cooking contest, she decided to be the judge herself to criticize Helk's dish, but Helk made her an extremely large and flavorful ice cream that she couldn't bring herself to criticize. Helk truly declared that the demon race was very interesting. Vermi left in frustration and saw posters of several candidates that she realized hadn't appeared. She was informed that these candidates had all been defeated by Helk. In the evening, as Vermi was racking her brain to find a way to eliminate the threat named Helk, Ista suddenly came to report the information Ista had found. Helk was a disaster for humanity. He had killed his own younger brother, and he was also the hero who had defeated the former Demon Lord. Vermi was shocked, wondering if Helk wasn't a hero. In fact, this era had produced 2 heroes, and Helk was now showing the young man Ken a picture of his younger brother. Helk still lingered on thoughts of his brother, while Vermi soon after learned that Ista had gone around 3 towns and found not a single person. At the same time, Han also rushed in to report that another Demon Lord's castle had fallen. She didn't know how humans managed to defeat it, but Han informed that the attackers were a winged battalion. Thanks to the commander sacrificing himself to allow the soldiers and demon civilians to escape, everyone managed to survive. Vermi knew this castle would soon be targeted, so she hastily prepared. Right after that, a horse racing competition took place. Han had prepared for Helk a horse that looked very depressed. When all the contestants entered the field, Helk's horse looked more like a cat. Vermi was worried that the public would realize they were obviously playing tricks, but everyone thought it was because Helk was so big that the horse looked smaller in comparison, making Vermi wonder if the intelligence of the public could still be saved. But soon after, the race began. Everyone else ran ahead while Helk and the cat remained stationary. Everyone thought Helk was beyond help. Ken thought Helk was unlucky to draw such a poor horse, while Huga knew this was the organizer's ploy. Vermi knew Helk was done for, so she went with Han to watch the leading contestants. Helk then heard the cat startled by the starting gun, but now that it had calmed down, he encouraged the cat that they would overcome the other contestants. Meanwhile, Huga and Ken were in the lead and competing with each other. Han promised that both would be the most suitable for the Demon Lord position. But that wasn't all, as Helk had now run here with the cat. This didn't violate the rules, so Vermi told Han to set up more traps. However, all the obstacles were smashed through by Helk. Only the suspension bridge looked promising, so Han had people pour oil and set up explosives. But the incompetent staff slipped on the oil and blew up the bridge themselves. Han still thought that without the bridge, Helk couldn't cross, but he hugged the cat and jumped across, running straight ahead. He was about to overtake Ken and Huga. He soon passed both of them, so Ken decided to jump down and run barefoot like him. He quickly caught up to Helk, and then finished just slightly behind him. Ken thought he really ran fast, but Helk said if Ken had run seriously like that from the start, he would have lost already. Helk then became friendlier with Ken, while Vermi couldn't be more frustrated. But before she could explode, Ista came to report that their intelligence had brought news. The situation at the conquered Demon Lord's castle was that only over 100 winged soldiers and one who seemed to be their commander remained. Apart from that, they hardly made any other moves. One of the 4 heavenly kings, Azura, had come. He was injured, but still came to give Vermi a strategy. It was about the upcoming final competition. He wanted to set the task as recapturing the Demon Lord's castle. Whoever eliminated the most enemies and made the greatest contribution would become the Demon Lord. The purpose was to both deal with those winged soldiers and to see if Helk intended to help the demon race or not. If worried about Helk turning on other contestants, he had this covenant ring that prevents contestants from attacking each other. But to be sure, Vermi decided to go along to personally supervise. If Helk intended to betray them, she would risk her life to stop him. Azura didn't want Vermi to bear that responsibility, but she had decided, and also because Azura was seriously injured and needed rest. On the day of the event, Vermi noticed that all 4 finalists seemed excited about the battle, except Ken. He seemed a bit worried, but cheered up when hearing about a supervisor going along to help. Vermi revealed herself, but with a fake name. Helk and Huga found her familiar and remembered she was the judge from the previous cooking round. Estelle was now breathing the fresh air in the human world and frustrated with the toxic air in the demon world. She decided to complete the investigation soon to help improve the demon world. Meanwhile, Vermi's group was still on their way to that castle. On the way, they had to face monsters born from toxins. Huga had a chance to stretch his muscles, but the numbers were still too great, so the uncle contestant who came along said he would gather the monsters to eliminate them at once. The uncle only needed to eat beans to create a barrier. But after eating the beans, it would take 30 minutes to complete the barrier, so Vermi got so angry that she burst out and dealt with them all at once. Huga then realized who she was. When they arrived at the rest base, Helk wandered around before cooking, while Huga informed Ken that the supervisor accompanying them was actually one of the 4 heavenly kings. However, Huga knew that Vermi's purpose in coming along was to monitor Helk. Ken didn't quite believe it and even thought Helk was very good. Vermi overheard and forbade both of them from talking nonsense in front of Helk and to just consider her as the supervisor accompanying them. Meanwhile, at the castle, Azura heard that Vermi's group was still progressing well, but would soon enter a tunnel full of monsters. Ista wanted to send people to support Vermi, but Azura thought that sending more people would only hinder Vermi more. Besides, they couldn't rule out the possibility of the winged ones coming here, so they still needed to keep forces here for defense. Despite saying this, Azura was still worried about Vermi. At that time, the whole group had entered the tunnel. Ken continuously introduced Helk to the types of monsters in there. The group's constant antics made Vermi and Huga quite tired. Suddenly, an extremely powerful monster appeared. This was a monster of the New World, attacking both demons and humans indiscriminately and growing stronger after each battle. Hulk then stepped up to fight. He charged forward and kicked it, making it fall back, and when he drew his sword, it was almost just for show as he didn't need it. They were then able to pass, but Vermi wanted to be sure, so she used magic to burn the monster's corpse before moving on. The group then got out of the tunnel and Vermi met with an intelligence agent. This person opened a secret passage into the castle for the whole group to enter. Vermi stated directly that whoever eliminated the enemy commander would win, but they shouldn't try so hard that they lose their lives unnecessarily. Hyuga still aimed for the top position and was extremely wary of the other three. They all seemed carefree, but who knew if they were more eager to win than her. Ken, however, aimed to help Hulk become the Demon Lord, while the uncle just wanted revenge for the general who had fallen at this castle. Hulk was truly carefree, while Vermi remembered her conversation with Azura that he was injured like this due to setting a trap for Hulk back at the old Demon Lord's castle. But it wasn't because Hulk attacked him, rather he fell into his own trap, which is why he ended up like this. He was also the one who introduced Hulk to this tournament. Although he fell into his own trap, if Hulk had seriously fought him at that time, he would probably have ascended to heaven already. The group had now truly infiltrated the conquered Demon Lord's castle. Vermi wanted the group to come up with a strategy, but everyone just irritated her, causing her to shout and alert the soldiers. They then stood up to fight, and Hyuga was the first to charge out, aiming for the commander. Everyone else ran out too, and Hulk also entered the battle. But just as Hyuga was targeted by the commander, he immediately rushed over and cut off one of her arms. The uncle was also struggling at this time, but only blocking attacks as he couldn't counterattack. The commander was about to finish off Hyuga when Hulk came to stop him. Hulk recognized him as an acquaintance, and he also took off his helmet. He was Eddie, an old acquaintance of Hulk. He explained that this form was the result of humans awakening, but the process of awakening like this was very painful and miserable. However, in exchange, humans would gain power like that of heroes, and the higher the awakening rate, the greater the power. But most of those who couldn't handle the awakening power would lose their sanity. Right after that, a flock of winged soldiers also flew in to assist him in the mission of exterminating the demon race. While he was rambling about how he had become stronger and would eradicate the demon race, he was suddenly cut by Hyuga, losing a wing. He didn't understand why she still had 2 arms, and she explained that her race had regenerative abilities, making them almost immortal. She also noticed that this group seemed still very weak. One tried to sneak attack Vermi, but was immediately incinerated by her. Indeed, they seemed to have the power of heroes, but were still pathetically weak. Hyuga had intentionally lost an arm to make the commander here careless. She didn't rush to take his life, but wanted to see what Hulk would do. Hyuga took another of his wings and even mocked him for being too weak. At this point, Vermi realized that the chance for them to coexist with humans was almost gone. So the only way for the demon race to escape extinction was to completely eradicate humans. Just as Hyuga was about to finish off Eddie, Hulk intervened, but not because he was an enemy, rather for another reason. Suddenly, Eddie was executed by one of the winged soldiers. He realized Hulk had seen something, so Hulk told everyone to leave. But the entire castle suddenly collapsed. Vermi's group then fell to the deepest part of the castle, but Hulk was nowhere to be seen. The group noticed a toxin barrier of the castle nearby, and above was a teleportation barrier created by those winged soldiers. If successful, it would bring all of humanity here to invade the demon world. But as it seemed to have failed, it would suck them in and take them to somewhere unknown. The bald uncle now showed his usefulness by creating a barrier to temporarily prevent them from being sucked in. But this barrier could only hold for a while. Vermi decided to go out and destroy the stone powering the teleportation gate. She launched an attack that temporarily cracked the stone. As she was about to launch a stronger attack, something flew into her head and she was sucked away. Hulk jumped down and ran to grab Vermi, but she had already managed to launch an attack to destroy the stone. However, the gate didn't close quickly enough, so Hulk grabbed her, and as a result, both were sucked into the gate. When she woke up, Vermi found herself teleported to some island and Hulk was nowhere to be seen. One day before Vermi set out, she had argued with Azura about cutting her long hair. Azura didn't agree, but she had already decided, so they fought to decide, and Azura was declared defeated. Ista couldn't bear to cut this hair, but Vermi thought that as long as she's alive, hair will grow back, so she didn't mind. Azura then woke up and ran to find her, shocked that Vermi had cut her hair. News of Vermi's situation quickly reached the palace. Ista tried to stay calm, but Azura was shocked to the point of foaming at the mouth. Meanwhile, Vermi realized that in front of her was the sea, and the feeling of breathing in an environment almost free of toxins was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She then went to look for food and tried to find a way back to the castle. But she heard the sound of a hammer, so she went to check and saw Helk building a house. She didn't understand why Helk was building a house, wondering if he was planning to live here permanently. Suddenly, a bird appeared behind her. It could talk and made Helk discover Vermi. She was startled, thinking Helk would take this opportunity to deal with her, but he did nothing. He explained that he was building the house so they wouldn't have to sleep rough. Since they couldn't return to the palace right away, they might as well stay here temporarily and think of a way back. But Vermi thought that if she kept Helk on this isolated island, he would no longer be a threat to the demon race. It then started to rain and Helk and the bird ran into the house. But Vermi didn't follow, so he had to rush out and carry her in. As soon as she entered the house, Helk reassured her that they could use the wood here to build a ship to return. She agreed half-heartedly, but then realized she needed to keep him here forever. But then she reconsidered for a moment. Why did Helk choose to risk his life to save her and end up here too? If he really saw them as enemies, he could have abandoned her. Or when they arrived here, he had plenty of opportunities to assassinate her. She gradually started to think that Helk truly wanted to help the demon race. Azura had now calmed down to consider the situation. Indeed, if humans completely evolved into heroes, the demon race would be doomed. So the priority now was to save Vermi. But Han thought they should attack humans, to which Azura said he wasn't in the mood to fight when Vermi was in danger. So Vermi was the top priority. But now, where to find a search team? Azura said he had a person-finding spell. He had developed this spell during his adventures. But to cast the spell, he needed a part of the person to be found. And so Vermi's hair became useful. But Azura didn't have Vermi's hair because when she cut it, he had asked for some and was incinerated. However, Ista had some, so she gave it to Azura to use. He then put Vermi's hair into a wooden statue and cast a spell to make it move on a map. Surprisingly, it went off the map, leaving everyone at a loss. At this moment, Esta received news and understood what the winged people the woman was seeing were. Despite the immediate danger, Esta still tried to gather as much information as possible. Meanwhile, Vermi was sitting fishing and thinking about Helk's actions. Why did he stop Hyuga from killing the commander? And now he even saved her. Could it be that Helk saw her as still valuable to exploit? If so, she worried that if she were to confront Helk now, defeat would be certain, and all remaining hope would have to be placed in Azura. But she didn't trust Azura one bit, so she'd rather continue to try to win Helk over here instead. Lost in thought, the bird had to remind her that a fish was biting so she could reel it in, but due to inexperience, she let the line break. Helk dove down to retrieve the fish, but he came up hugging some creature that, according to the bird, was poisonous and inedible. That night, they both went home to sleep, and the next morning, Vermi woke up and saw that the trap she had set was untouched. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and when she opened it, there was a pig like Nan-Na. This one brought food for her, but had eaten most of it, so she let it eat the rest and asked who had told it to bring her food. It said the village chief had instructed it to. She wanted to see its village, so it led her there. It didn't look much like a village, just a few houses close together, and only residents like these lived on the island. They suddenly became afraid of strangers like Vermi, and the bird suddenly flew in to inform her that Helk was planning to make a boat. Worried that Helk had found a way back, she ran to see and found him holding an axe and emitting a beam of light. He swung and lightly chopped a few trees, but the axe shattered, so he switched to chopping trees with his bare hands, just like in that cube game. He then noticed Vermi and the bird. Vermi asked if he knew the way back, but he said he was just preparing in advance. She then sensed something and ran off. She later discovered an ancient ruin out at sea, and the bird knew nothing about these things. Helk had finished making the boat, but it looked more like a raft than a boat. Suddenly, someone claiming to be the village chief came looking to meet Helk and Vermi. they both had to follow him, and Helk also seemed cautious, making Vermi wonder how dangerous this old man was. They were then surrounded by many people wearing black clothes, but immediately after, all the island residents took off their cloaks, wanting to surprise Vermi. They all welcomed the two visitors to this island. Helk already knew and was also arranged into this plan, but it didn't surprise Vermi much. The group then organized a party, and the village chief was happy that the two had brought a new breeze to the island. Vermi thanked them for the bed and sleepwear, which Helk had borrowed for her. As for the direction back to the mainland, the chief didn't know because he had never looked into ways to leave the island, but he believed the witch would know. The witch was currently researching on the other island, and because these kids here often disturbed the witch, that person had put up a barrier to research in peace. In 2 days, that person would come down from the mountain, so they could ask about the direction to the mainland. Vermi then played with the island residents, from fun games to fishing. Eventually, Vermi found it annoying because she couldn't refuse them, and she needed privacy. Helk thought that most people he met were good people, so she warned Helk about bad people in the world and that there weren't few in this demon race either. Helk felt sad hearing these things, but she didn't mean to say harsh words, only to warn him. But he understood her and ladled her a bowl of soup. Vermi now asked why he saved her, and he revealed that he was grateful to her for accepting him into the demon army. At that time, he thought he would be rejected for being human, but he was still accepted. Now he feels quite lonely as his former comrades have all become enemies. Vermi asked him about that winged commander, and he said that person and he were as close as brothers and had been slaying monsters together for many years. As they talked, it got dark, so Helk wanted to go back to his room. Vermi asked him if he was ready to point his sword at his own kind, and he was certain that was what he had to do, because those winged warriors were no longer human. They were just creatures that only obeyed the king's orders. So, as a human, he would end everything to prevent humans from bringing all other species to extinction. During that time, Hyuga and Ken were still luring monsters to eliminate them, wanting to avoid too many monsters appearing during the reconstruction. However, at this moment, another group of winged warriors arrived. These three seemed quite strong. They saw that Eddie appeared to have perished and suspected it was due to underestimating a female opponent. Hyuga rushed in to engage and managed to get past the sword wielder to target the archer behind. But she also had a sword to block, and the nearby mage didn't hesitate to aim at his own ally to attack Hyuga, forcing her to retreat. Moreover, there were not just 3 but many more above. Hyuga decided to buy time for Ken to escape since he couldn't help much by staying now, so he tried to use his speed to go back and report to the leadership. But at this moment, Han and Ista arrived to support. Han raised shields to block attacks while Ista assassinated anyone who charged forward. She wanted the group to leave because they had a plan. The group had to follow Ista and run away, and the other side decided to keep one person back to finish off the rest. They chased the group all the way outside, but their reinforcements consisted of only 2 people, the younger sister Roman 11 from the tournament and Azura. But Azura was better reinforcement than anyone else. He wore a mask for some unknown reason, but they only knew that he was very angry at this moment. Both the previous Demon Lord and the Sacrifice General had to respect him to some extent. He wore a mask because he didn't want anyone to see his angry face. He still gave those humans a chance to turn back and continue living with humans, but they scorned Azura's opinion and believed that his talk of humans and demons once living together was nonsense. They absolutely refused to listen to Azura and only followed their king, so they decided to attack Azura. He also had subjects to protect, so he didn't bother persuading anymore. He then created a mass of tree roots and bound all the airborne soldiers. They didn't expect him to be so strong and thought he was the leader of the demon race. But no, he was just one of the 4 heavenly kings. According to Han, Azura could freely manipulate trees in demon territory, whether dead or alive. If considered, he might be the weakest among the 4 heavenly kings, but if there were trees on the battlefield, he wouldn't fear anyone. He didn't want to kill them and still gave them a chance to surrender and return, but they refused him. Suddenly, an arrow flew towards them, so Azura had to block it. A barrage of arrows was fired from the winged soldiers on the wall above. Han raised shields to protect everyone while Azura had trees for cover, but the arrows weren't just aimed at them, but also at the captured winged ones. Hyuga saw it was like Eddie before, also killed by an ally's spear. They all accepted their deaths and believed they had harvested something. Although they had awakened and still suffered a crushing defeat, they acknowledged the demon race was very strong. According to the sword wielder, they weren't afraid of death and saw this only as a learning experience for next time, because they could be reborn again and again, and no matter how strong the demon race was, they couldn't withstand continuous attacks. They then died and turned into lights that flew away. Indeed, those winged warriors had all been resurrected back to the divine temple before the human king. The commanders from earlier had also been resurrected here, and Ista had sneaked in to gather more information. Azura's group was now sitting in Han's barrier to rest, and Ista had reported back to Ista. From the information obtained, the evolution of humans being able to resurrect was true, but now they shouldn't panic. They then determined the priorities, with finding Vermi still at the top and Helk at the bottom of the list. Humans weren't ranked too high in terms of danger, as Hyuga had fought them and found they weren't really so strong that they had to struggle. And even if they could resurrect every day, it wasn't too big a deal as they were used to eliminating monsters daily. However, if those warriors could gradually become stronger, it would be a real threat. But Azura wasn't too worried because he had a way to nullify that resurrection ability, because no living being can live without facing death. So this resurrection was due to a spell, and they just needed to eliminate the one who created this spell to solve everything. In other words, they had to deal with the king of humans. He had previously faced a hero with the ability to resurrect and learned that the hero's king was the one casting the spell. So with the information Astaire reported, it seemed this case was similar. It was also roughly like the contract he made for the candidates in the recent competition. But the contract the heroes made with the king might be many times stronger than his. Ista wondered why the human king was so powerful, and Azura revealed that the king was also a type of awakened hero, but not a combat type, rather a support type. If they looked at how strong Helk was, they could understand that the king was no less powerful than Helk. Han was concerned about whether they could defeat that king, but now they had to try even if it seemed impossible. Azura now requested everyone to return to the ruined castle to defend against the upcoming attack. After that, they would train an elite army to set out and reclaim the former demon lord's castle that had fallen into human hands before. The reconstruction of the castle then began. Ken didn't like war much and asked the bald man why the two races couldn't compete to decide their fate. So he asked Ken if he would accept seeing his own kind die just because they lost a competition, which was obviously not acceptable. Ista was now worried about her older sister because Asta had warned her not to be reckless. But it seemed the warning was in vain. Hyuga told her not to worry because Asta had trained together with her before, so she had plenty of combat experience. Azura and Han had gone to the closed gate from before. Azura thought he could create a small gate to send items and messages to Vermi. He then managed to open a small gate and Han threw items through. Although he had only opened it a little, Azura's strength was so depleted that he almost lost consciousness. He could only hope that Vermi would receive the message. On the other side, the blue bird passing by the beach found the items Azura had sent. Meanwhile, Vermi was trying to cook something as delicious as Helk's cooking. She still couldn't do it, and when Helk wanted to try, she wouldn't let him because she wasn't satisfied with it yet. The bird then brought back firewood and was urged by Vermi to put it in before the fire went out, so it threw Azura's message into the stove as well. Vermi now realized that Helk was carrying a very heavy responsibility. At first, she found him too suspicious, but after hearing his story, her view of Helk had changed. She had never thought about having to point a sword at comrades like Helk now had to. Suddenly, the pink pig guy ran over and reported that the witch had come down from the mountain, so Vermi rushed back and asked it to inform Helk too. When she got there, she heard that the witch had returned to the mountain. She blamed herself for running slower than a crawling turtle, but Helk had also returned, and the pig apologized for falling asleep on the way to inform Vermi. But the village chief said he had told the witch about both of them, so they should go up the mountain to find her as the witch had removed the barrier. He asked the blue bird to guide them both. And now we know this bird is Duo Lin Go. Just kidding, it's Pewee. While going up the mountain, Pewee warned them both not to anger the witch. Vermi wasn't sure if the witch knew the way back to the continent or not, but they had no choice but to take a chance. The three of them then saw the witch's house, and it was strangely gloomy. But when they called out at the door, another blue bird came out. Vermi thought this was the real witch, but the witch was actually behind all three of them. Pee-wee called her Granny, so she tickled him a few times. The witch had heard their story, so she would show them the way back to the continent. They needed to go northwest to return to the continent they came from. Vermi realized there was more than one continent and wondered how the witch knew where they came from. But leaving that aside, the witch said that getting back to the continent would be very difficult. They needed provisions and a sturdy ship to withstand the storms at sea. They also needed a creature that could determine direction in case they lost visibility. And the creature she mentioned was the sea deer in the book here. When they lost direction, they should release it into the sea, and it would help them know which way was which. Remembering that Helk had caught this creature the other day, Vermi told him to go look for it again. He recalled seeing it in the sea this morning, so he went to check. The witch had told Vermi to stay here for one night. Vermi wanted to know who this witch really was, and if she might also be from their continent. The witch didn't want to reveal anything, only telling Vermi to be careful with Helk, as he was a more dangerous existence than she imagined. For now, Helk would be her ally, but for how long was uncertain, as Helk's path was now full of darkness, hope had vanished, and he had no other goal than to exterminate humans. The next day, they officially set out to return to the continent. The island's residents all came to bid them farewell. The witch gave their boat a magic box to propel it, with the understanding that if it broke, they'd have to row by hand. As they left, Vermi remembered the witch's words, that she shouldn't become a flame that burns allies, but rather a light illuminating Helk's dark path. However, she believed the outcome of the battle would be determined by Vermi alone. On the way, Helk took the opportunity to catch some fish, while Vermi, checking the ship, discovered that Pee-wee had also tagged along. It said it wanted to explore the world, but Vermi insisted on returning it to the island due to the dangerous journey ahead. However, Pee-wee brought a letter from the witch, asking Vermi to let Pee-wee come along as it was used to danger, and could help Vermi stay calm. The witch suggested that if Vermi felt stressed, she should lie on Pee-wee's belly, which would be very relaxing. Helk also wanted Pee-wee to stay, so Vermi had to give in. They soon encountered a sea monster, forcing Vermi to activate the propulsion device to escape quickly. When they were quite far, Vermi again wanted to return Pee-wee, but Helk thought they'd gone too far to turn back and said he could protect Pee-wee himself. So the group continued their journey and a few days later entered a foggy sea. Helk released the deer into the water, which pulled them in the opposite direction they'd been going, helping the boat find the right path out of the fog. Not long after, the group was caught in a storm and Vermi had to struggle to get out of a whirlpool. The sea monster found them again, and Helk saw it as a challenge. He lunged to punch it, but the octopus was unfazed and caught Helk instead. He had to escape, and Vermi wanted to use magic to help him. But if she didn't provide enough magic to the propulsion device, the boat would enter the whirlpool. Helk told her he'd be fine and to go ahead. She then steered the boat out of the whirlpool while Helk was caught tightly by the octopus and pulled underwater. Vermi had no choice but to go ahead. The next morning, the storm had cleared and she could see the continent. When she reached land, she was surprised to find Helk already waiting for her. Helk explained that when the monster pulled him down, he managed to escape, swim to the surface, and seeing land, came here to wait for her. Moreover, he still had a goal to accomplish, so he wouldn't die in such a foolish way. Vermi asked Helk not to do such stupid things again, and he agreed. Vermi wanted him to help her unpack, but Pee-wee wanted her to rest first, so she indulged it, and then unpacked with Helk and released the deer. The three hadn't gone far when they were ambushed. Some demon clan members appeared to capture them. Vermi realized these might be local tribal people, so she accepted being captured as she also needed a map of the area. These people seemed decent, so no one wanted to resist, and they let themselves be led away. These three people led them to their country, which was in a state of poverty and misery. From what they heard, this was the Alihu tribe, currently being invaded and exploited by the Tutman tribe. The Tutman tribe previously had only 50 people and no leader, but since a king took charge, they had grown stronger and started invading other places. The people were cursed and couldn't resist. They had to capture people like this as tribute to the Tutman to prevent them from torturing their compatriots. The princess of Alihu appeared and believed that capturing people and submitting to the Tutman was wrong, so she ordered the three soldiers to release Vermi's group. But just then, the Tutman arrived. The princess told Vermi's group to hide temporarily. All three of them then saw the scene of the Tutman king torturing the princess and decided that they were tired of conquering other tribes and from now on would only kill and destroy countries that stood in their way. He gave the princess a choice: either force her people to fight for him or he would annihilate them all. She wanted to refuse because her people could no longer fight, but he didn't care, forcing Helk to intervene. He then slapped a Tutman soldier, sending him flying, while Vermi used magic to make the Tutman soldiers stay away from the Elihu people. She wanted Helk to handle things freely while she would protect the people. The king then sent his soldiers to attack, but Helk knocked them all away, trying to use just enough force not to kill anyone. Seeing his soldiers were useless, the king charged in himself, infusing magic into his fist and throwing a punch that created a cloud of smoke. He thought Helk was finished and approached Vermi, saying she was brave to challenge him and asking which tribe or country she was from so he could destroy it. But she told him to defeat Helk first before fighting her. He thought she was delusional since he believed he had already dealt with Helk, but he was the delusional one as Helk was still standing behind him. Helk said that punch felt like a scratch and even 100 of those wouldn't harm him. The king then angrily punched Helk repeatedly, but after the smoke cleared, he was still standing. Helk decided to show him what a real punch was like, and with just one uppercut, sent him flying a long distance. He adjusted his strength to keep the king conscious after that blow. He wanted the king to lift the curse he had placed on the Elihu people and leave this place, but the king became angry and lost control. His hand grew large and he struck Helk, pushing him back. His body then swelled up and he vowed to destroy Helk. His strength now grew abnormally large. Vermi used a technique to cut off one of his arms, but he was able to regenerate it. Helk knew this guy couldn't be saved anymore, so he released his killing intent to destroy him. Vermi sensed the killing intent and felt uneasy. Helk only needed one punch to make the king's arm fall off and unable to regrow. Vermi noticed he was starting to crumble and realized he had exchanged his life force for power in a short time, and this seemed to be his limit. He then disintegrated and disappeared. The Tutman soldiers then stood up, and Vermi thought they were going to avenge their king, but they thanked both of them instead. It seemed they were also afraid of the king but didn't dare to rebel. Suddenly, there was a light coming from the Elihu people, so both of them went to check. Pee-wee informed them that the people suddenly started glowing, and now they had transformed back to their original form, cute and gentle citizens instead of the ugly forms they had before. The princess bowed to thank both of them and wanted to know their names to record in the Elihu history books. Pee-wee spoke on their behalf, and that night, the whole city held a celebration. The next morning, Vermi brought a map to head west, because the map here didn't extend to her empire, so maybe the two big cities in the west would have a map leading to the empire. She then asked where Helk was, and he was waving goodbye to the Elihu people, hoping they would be able to restore their country. Not long after setting out, Vermi heard from a peddler that the two big cities she was heading to had been destroyed in a war. For more details, they should go to the small town nearby to ask. The three of them then went into the town to try, and it seemed to be full of peddlers. Nearby, there was a girl singing in the streets, and Vermi thought she looked like a refugee from those two cities. She then saw a map shop, and they had a map of the empire. The shop owner, seeing that Vermi really needed it, tried to overcharge her. Since she didn't have money from this place, she asked the owner to keep the map and not sell it to anyone else. She then went to exchange money and even used the minerals given by the Elihu princess, but could only exchange for half the amount needed. Suddenly, there was a cooking contest nearby with a prize enough to buy the map. So Vermi believed in Helk's cooking skills to win the prize money, but he was worried if his skills would suit the taste of the local people. However, Vermi still dragged him to register, and then noticed that this contest had many prominent participants, all of whom were well known in the culinary world. As many prominent contestants were competing, Helk was barely noticed. The challenge this time was hot pot. Vermi went into the kitchen to help Helk. One contestant was making pizza dough for a hot pot contest, while another with buck teeth caught people's attention as he planned to make a dish that very few had succeeded in making. But then everyone saw Helk standing still and thought he was in shock. However, he was actually cutting vegetables at an incredible speed, with large pieces flying into the pot. When nearly finished, Vermi tasted the broth and exclaimed it was amazingly delicious. Everyone was surprised to hear there was a hidden master here. Vermi informed them that Helk was the top contestant in the culinary competition to choose the new Demon King. The buck-toothed guy saw him as a strong opponent and became more fired up. Meanwhile, the street singer girl accidentally met Pee-wee, who was lost. She asked where it needed to go so she could lead it there. At that time, the contest was coming to an end, waiting for the judges to score. Vermi saw that everyone was formidable, so she was a bit worried. The judges then scored. One contestant's dish was too spicy, but okay. One made pizza, which was off-topic, but still tasty. The buck-toothed youth's dish was too difficult, and not completely successful, but still fine. And for Helk's dish, there was nothing left to say excellent. 10 points, perfect, superb. So Helk won the competition. The buck-toothed youth lost all motivation, but Helk came to encourage him, so he gave Helk his recipe book, saying he would make a new one. Vermi only then noticed Pee-wee had been lost, but it had returned and was shocked to hear the contest was over. The three of them then went to the shop owner and bought the map. They roughly knew the route, but the owner advised them not to go through the area with the two destroyed cities. The street singer girl said that place was dangerous because of a dark hero. According to her, this person roamed around the area of the two destroyed countries, and if anyone entered there and encountered him, it would be difficult to return. So the advice was to take a detour. But Vermi just thanked them for the warning, saying she was in a hurry and couldn't take a detour. The owner still wanted to advise both not to risk their lives. The two then left, calling Pee-wee to follow. The girl called Pee-wee back to say something before letting the group go. The three soon reached the ruins of the two fallen countries. Seeing such large ruins, it was clear how populous this place once was, and surely many people had lost their lives. Suddenly, a gust of wind came, and Vermi saw the dark hero appear. As soon as she turned her head, he had instantly approached, forcing Helk to punch him away. She didn't understand how he could be so fast, and she felt uneasy about the aura he emitted. It was similar to the aura she sensed from the Tutman King before. She then took Pee-wee away first, leaving Helk to fight. He was approached by the other and got a cut on his cheek. He then had to fight on his own, and Vermi knew she had to return soon to support Helk. He successfully broke the other's sword, but before he could rejoice, the sword had regenerated. Vermi had put Pee-wee in a safe place and quickly returned to Helk. She came back and threw a massive fireball at the dark hero, but he wasn't fazed at all, so Helk threw another punch from behind to blow him away. But he disappeared right after and then approached to slash Helk again. Vermi didn't understand and tried to find a strategy while Helk continued to fight and hold on. She suspected this person was being controlled by someone, so she tried to call Helk to run away, but he wasn't listening and kept punching the hero. Pee-wee suddenly appeared and sang a few lines, causing the hero to no longer be as enraged as before. Helk returned to Vermi and apologized for not hearing her call earlier as he was a bit panicked. Pee-wee said the song from earlier was taught by the girl before, who instructed to sing it if they encountered the dark hero. She asked about Helk's wound, but he flexed and recovered immediately. The hero was now slowly leaving, and Helk suspected there was something strange about him, so he told Vermi to follow along. The three then followed the hero to a temple. Not sure if there were traps inside, they remained cautious. The hero now sat in one place and said that war had caused too many things. At first, no one liked war until their families, friends, and loved ones were killed. From then on, the two countries began to hate each other, and a dark curse was used, turning the soldiers on both sides into hideous monsters. The monsters from both countries slaughtered each other, eventually bringing the war to an end. However, the remaining monsters lost their minds, forcing humans and heroes alike to resort to dark powers to fight against them. He tried to save as many people as possible, but now he has succumbed to the dark power. His body is beginning to disintegrate, and he apologizes for attacking both of them while in a semi-conscious state. He notices something about Helk and tells him that he has quite a nice weapon. He throws his sword to Helk, believing it will help him at some point. He wants Helk not to follow in his footsteps and then asks to hear the song from earlier again. But the wandering singer has come and reunited with the hero. She is the little girl he once saved before. At that time, even though he had lost consciousness, he still found a way to save people, making the girl greatly respect him. Helk wants to leave the moment for the couple, so he calls Pee-wee and Vermi to go ahead. The three of them then go to find a place to rest for the night. Pee-wee invites both of them to race on these ruined walls. Vermi refuses, but Helk joins in, so she doesn't want to be left behind and ends up racing too. She still loses to Helk, and when she looks back, Pee-wee couldn't jump over the wall, so he took flight. Vermi tells Pee-wee not to go ahead without looking at the road, because right after that, Pee-wee ends up in a monster's mouth. In the following days, the human army continuously attacks the castle defended by Azura's army, and Eddie is still bitter and constantly targets Hyuga, but loses all 6 times he attacks. The demon army's defense is extremely solid, so casualties are almost 0. Moreover, they are used to this, so everyone feels extremely excited for the next attack after repelling the human army. However, if the human army truly evolves, it would be a different story. Han informs Azura that their strategy of capturing rather than killing is gradually being figured out and may soon no longer be applicable. But Ista comes to announce that the levels of humans after these recent battles are gradually increasing, but the highest is only 32, while on the demon army side, leaders like Hyuga have increased to 52. So it can be said that the recent battle not only leveled up the heroes, but also their demon king candidates. Azura is then advised to take a rest because he has overexerted himself these past few days with the detection spell. Han has reminded him several times, but he stubbornly uses this spell every day. Azura uses the detection spell one more time, and fortunately, this time Vermi's location appears on the map, so he quickly asks someone to bring the map here. On the human side, the commanders are now meeting with each other, or rather, everyone is shouting to argue. The blonde-haired sword-wielding guy gets bored and leaves, but suddenly senses an intruder and flies up to search. However, Esta manages to escape in time, so he thinks he might be overthinking. Esti realizes they have become more sensitive, so she must be more careful when hiding. Meanwhile, Azura has prepared a search team. They are still worried about Helk, but Azura believes that if Vermi is still with Helk at this time, it shows that she has somewhat trusted Helk, so they can only trust Vermi's decision and judgment. During this time, Vermi's group encounters a monster in the desert. Vermi has to chase the monster away herself instead of letting Helk handle it. The group then decides to camp at a rock to wait for dawn. Since the last incident, Vermi has been worried whenever Helk fights. She fears Helk will lose control and become a threat to the demon race as she worried. Helk also notices her uneasiness and tells her to talk to him privately later. Helk then makes her a drink and gives her the sword he's been keeping. This broken sword has the ability to kill a hero, and although it's broken, it's enough to take the life of a hero like him. So he gives it to her, in case he really becomes her enemy, she can take his life. But Vermi refused. She admits that she was wary of him from the beginning, but after their adventure so far, she has reassessed Helk and knows he is a trustworthy ally, so she won't accept it. Helk thanked her but still wanted to tell her what happened and then ask her to listen to his request once again. Years ago, when Helk was 8 years old, he had to work hard and only received a loaf of bread for his younger brother. His younger brother, Kles, was being bullied by 3 nobles, forcing Helk to run back to protect his brother. But these were the type who abused their power, so they switched to beating Helk instead of Kles. Both brothers had no parents left after an incident when monsters attacked their village and caused many deaths. They both tried to survive, which is why they came to this capital city. Yet in the capital, there were only people like this. The poor like them were treated worse than livestock. Both were forced to live in a slum area that was both dirty and lacked proper food. But for Helk, as long as his younger brother was safe, he was willing to endure everything. The reason Helk was willing to take beatings for his brother was that from a young age, he could already do that super recovery trick, which shocked Vermi tremendously. She didn't expect Helk to awaken his hero powers so early. The bullying continued afterwards, sometimes having their food thrown into the sewers, sometimes their house being destroyed or burned, sometimes their wages being stolen by those nobles. But the 2 brothers didn't leave the capital because compared to the monsters out there, it was still much better here. They both remained optimistic, living day by day and nurturing hope that someday when there were fewer monsters, they would set out on an adventure so they wouldn't be oppressed anymore. But not long after, a big problem arose. Kles became severely malnourished to the point of near death, and Helk had no way to cure him. Helk decided to carry Kles on his back to find a doctor because he had saved up some money. But no one was willing to help Kles. Some refused because the two brothers were beggars. Others thought Helk had stolen the money because how could someone from the slums have money? Helk then tried to encourage his brother to hang on, and when he noticed Kles had passed out, he became even more urgent. He then ran and begged anyone who could help, but people not only didn't care but also pushed Helk down. A noble girl asked about the situation and immediately ran off. Helk had almost lost hope when the father of the girl from earlier, who was a kind-hearted nobleman, came and saved Kles. Kles was saved, and Helk's view of nobles changed somewhat. Many years passed, and Kles is now a renowned knight and leader of the Knight Squad. He achieved great feats by slaying many monsters and walks in glory and the welcome of all citizens. Helk tells us that the person who saved Kles was from a family that had long supported the king. The daughter of the person who saved Kles is Ami. For some reason, Ami often came to play with the two brothers without discriminating that they were from the slum area. And since playing with her, the bullying decreased significantly because they thought the two brothers were Ami's attendants. But the fact that people in the slum area were still being oppressed kept weighing on Kles's mind. Kles realized that if monsters were eradicated, people would pay attention to the oppression of the poor and stand up against it. So Kles planned to enlist early to go slay monsters and save people. From then on, Kles began to learn swordsmanship, day after day, rain or shine. At 16, Kles began to enlist, and after just 2 years, he was promoted to squad leader. Ami's father came to find Helk and saw that the scrawny kid from before had become a warrior who could easily handle monsters, and he suspected that Kles's talent might have surpassed his own. He sensed that Helk also carried great power within him, but Helk just thought he had grown this big due to manual labor. His swordsmanship and combat skills were basically non-existent, and now he realized that the man had sensed the power that he himself hadn't even recognized. Because Kles often had to go out to slay monsters after enlisting, it was difficult for the two brothers to spend time together. But they still tried to arrange time to have meals together, and Helk noticed that Kles and Ami seemed quite compatible, so he decided to play matchmaker for the two. Both of them went to meet Helk and saw him smiling. All three then went to eat together, and by the end of the meal, Ami had fallen asleep. Kles informed them that he would be going on a quite long journey soon, so it would be a while before he could return. Helk decided to wait and make Kles's favorite dish for when he comes back. Half a month after Kles left on his expedition, monsters appeared more frequently than usual. The army had to recruit more soldiers, and Helk and Eddie joined and left the capital for a while. During their first mission, their group encountered an unusually strong monster, which was precisely a New World monster. At that time, Helk only dared to think about running away, but because his comrades were still there, he couldn't. Helk stood back to fight and had to admit that its attacks were incredibly strong. He was determined to buy time for his comrades to escape and continuously took hits. But then unconsciously, Helk started punching back at the monster. Having no martial arts skills, he just punched randomly and luckily defeated the monster. The group commander had died, so Eddie had no choice but to let the soldiers return while he himself requested reinforcements, as he was also the son of a lord. Helk asked to go along to help people if he could. 3 days later, when Eddie returned to his hometown, he found it had been attacked by monsters. Helk encouraged him to run in and assess the situation. Both of them encountered a female warrior fighting monsters, so they went to help. The three successfully pushed back the monsters, but the girl was shocked by Helk's extraordinary strength. He also noticed that she had quite good sword skills, and she revealed that she was holding the Holy Sword, an extremely powerful sword. She wondered how Helk could defeat more monsters than her using just his bare hands despite her sword skills. Eddie later met everyone in his hometown and learned that this girl and her comrades were mercenaries. She was Alicia, and she had agreed to be Eddie's soldier. They then rebuilt the town, and Helk was always called by Alicia to fight monsters whenever they appeared. Eddie was mostly left at home, which is why he became so weak in combat. But even though those days were busy, Helk and everyone were happy. Eddie was the one who brought motivation to the team, while Alicia was the one who always saved her comrades in the most dangerous moments. They were the best comrades he had. But one day, Alicia had a private conversation with Helk. She admitted that Helk was the first person she acknowledged as surpassing her. He always paid attention to everyone around him, while she only focused on the enemy in front of her. If Helk hadn't been there all this time, she might not have kept everyone alive until now. Alicia said that if all the monsters were cleared out, she would still keep Helk to adventure together, rather than returning him to be a wall repairman for the capital. 4 years later, the monsters hadn't decreased at all, but had increased. The king at this time had declared that the Demon King was the source of the monsters, so he assigned Kless to deal with the Demon King. Vermi knew that her Demon King was not the source of those monsters. 3 weeks after Kless set out, good news about Kless defeating the Demon King spread throughout the kingdom. But Helk couldn't be happy because he had run back to visit his brother, who had been seriously injured in the recent battle. He comforted Ami that Kless would recover soon. The doctor who had saved Kless years ago was a great sage. He apologized to Helk for bearing the title of Great Sage, but not being able to help Kless in the recent battle. The people were rejoicing while their hero was seriously ill. It couldn't be helped because peace had just arrived. However, Alicia noticed that even though the Demon King had died, the monsters hadn't decreased at all. Her concern was proven right when a large horde of monsters approached the capital. Upon hearing the news, the frightened people went to the palace to demand the hero to fight again, even though they knew Kless was severely injured. Helk couldn't bear to see his brother slandered, so he suspected that the Demon King might have resurrected and decided to go fight the Demon King again. Helk returned to the Demon King's castle and encountered Azura there. The two fought for a while, and Helk asked why Azura was sending monsters to attack humans. Azura realized he was not the hero who had defeated the Demon King, so she explained to him that this Demon King's castle was originally created to reduce the number of reproducing monsters. The destruction of this castle had caused more monsters to be born. It was understandable because humans had been taught from a young age that the demon race was evil. Azura took Helk to the graves he had made for those who had fallen. Although she deeply hated humans, Azura revealed that the demon race really wanted to rebuild friendly relations with humans once again. Helk then listened to Azura's story and learned that humans gradually forgot about coexisting with the demon race because humans constantly conflicted, causing civilization to be destroyed and rebuilt many times. So, coexistence was gradually forgotten, causing humans to turn to see the demon race as enemies. The demon race had called for peace many times, but always failed. The Demon King that Kless had defeated was also a Demon King who greatly valued peace. Helk then wanted to go back and tell the truth, and Azura informed him that there would be a contest to choose a new Demon King soon. When the new Demon King ascends, the castle will be repaired and a barrier will be erected to prevent monsters from reproducing again. Helk later recounted that when he left, he heard Azura's voice echoing, thinking she was wishing him well, but Vermi knew it was the sound of Azura self-destructing and stepping into her own trap. He then returned to the capital and saw traces of a fierce battle there. Helk was worried about his comrades, so he rushed in to meet everyone again. Everyone was still alive but injured, from broken arms to lost eyes. He asked about what happened and learned that they had to fight monsters without retreating because the nobles had relied too much on Kless. So when trouble came, they just hid in the city and didn't dare to come out and fight. Fortunately, thanks to Eddie and Alicia, they were able to hold out. After the battle, both of them were angry with the cowardly commander, so they were now reporting to request punishment for that commander. They advised Helk to go meet those two because both were eagerly waiting for Helk's return. Helk then realized that this country couldn't do without Kless. He later heard that the people had caught some demon race members, so he went to see and found those demons being heartlessly stoned by the people. He stood up to shield them and tried to explain Azura's words to the people, but his words carried no weight and changed nothing. Ami's father came and suggested that Helk shouldn't let the demon race deceive him because right after that, those 3 demon race members transformed into monsters and attacked the people. The uncle believed this was the true form of the demon race, and Helk thought he had been deceived by Azura. Right after that, 3 muscular warriors appeared, but Helk rushed down and dealt with those 3 monsters. Eddie and Alicia were still safe and met Helk again. Yesterday, Ami's father announced the appearance of the first awakened warriors. Thanks to these warriors, in the time that followed, even though monsters constantly attacked, no one lost their lives. Helk was still worried about what Azura had said. One day, his teammates caught Eddie eating at a restaurant for couples, so they left it to Helk and Alicia to go together, trying to push them as a couple. Helk was quite naive, so he only thought they realized he was worried and wanted to give him a chance to be alone with Alicia to talk. He invited Alicia, and she was quite shy, but then excitedly went to change clothes. He wanted Eddie to come along, but Eddie thought Helk was nervous about male-female relationships, so he still wanted to let him go alone with Alicia. Suddenly, a blonde young man came and wanted to ask for Helk's help. This young man was Zell, and he revealed that this newly awakened power would push the country into destruction. Zell told them the truth that those warriors were death row inmates. They had been experimented on and turned into warriors. In return, they would lose their humanity and become puppets for their creators. The court was plotting to turn all the people, except the nobles, into those warriors. This plan was devised by the great sage and was eventually agreed upon by both Ami's father and the entire court. This plan could be prevented because the great sage needed the king and Kless to perform the spell to turn all the people into warriors at once. The king was being watched in a secret place, so they could only pull Kless out of this to prevent the plan from happening. Zell had heard of Helk's reputation, that he had the strength of over 100 men, single-handedly defeated 50 monsters, and returned safely from the Demon King's castle. But Eddie had to correct it, saying that he was actually stronger than 500 people, dealt with over 200 monsters alone, and returned from the Demon King's castle without a scratch. Zell revealed that Kless had asked him to find Helk if anything happened, as Kless believed Helk was even stronger than himself. Zell bowed his head and asked Helk to help him save the people and his best friend Kless. Alicia had heard everything and decided to lend a hand. When Helk wanted to do it alone, Alicia rejected the idea and advised him to rely more on his teammates. That night, Zell created a small riot to draw out the soldiers, making it easier for them to act. The group then encountered the awakened warriors, which were too easy for Helk to handle. The other three were not so weak as to lose to this group, so they passed through easily. Along the way, Helk told the three about Azura's matter, but everyone advised him not to trust it so completely as Azura might have made it up out of concern for Helk's power. However, Alicia suggested that after this, she and Helk would return there to confirm. The group then managed to enter the room where Kless was being held captive. They met Kless, but also the great sage along with the council of elders, and above all, the king himself. The king only gave one order, and the Alicia group behind them fell to their knees and nearly raised their swords to die by the king's command. But Helk stood up to stop them. He wasn't manipulated by the king's spell, so the elders wanted the great sage to do something to Helk. But he couldn't be harmed by their warriors, so the great sage had Kless come out to fight. The king gave an order, and Kless stood up to fight Helk. Helk couldn't bring himself to fight his younger brother, so he could only dodge and let Kless cut him a few times. But at that moment, Alicia took out the holy sword and slashed Kless once. Kless was injured, causing the great sage to realize that this was the hero slayer. Helk took the opportunity to escape with Kless, but Alicia was controlled by the sage. He stole the holy sword and went behind Helk to stab him once. Helk was in excruciating pain from that strike. Although it only hit his shoulder, he felt it like a fatal wound. Helk fought back, but the sage turned into a shadow like Nettie. At this moment, Kless woke up and grabbed a sword, rushing to break the holy sword and take the life of the great sage. The king was about to give an order when Kless threw a sword straight at his head, but he still managed to order Kless to take Helk's life. Kless approached with a broken sword blade in his hand, but Kless only apologized for always causing trouble for his older brother, and then stabbed himself in the neck and died. Helk was very angry, and when he heard the elders say that Kless was just useless, Helk became furious. He burst out a dark aura that made everyone tremble in fear. Helk was now like a monster, but Alicia was the one who helped him calm down. She apologized because her sword had caused suffering to both Helk brothers. He really wanted to say it wasn't her fault, but he collapsed. The awakened warriors rose up to fight. In his dream, Helk remembered punching the nobles to help Kless, and when the two brothers were going home, Helk had asked Kless what he wanted to eat, but Kless was now gone. Helk had returned home and only saw the scene from earlier appear before his eyes. He blamed himself for always saying beautiful words while never really being able to protect Kless. Helk woke up after a long period of unconsciousness and didn't know where everyone was. He stumbled out of a cave and met two bounty hunters. He heard them talk about how his teammates had fought to the death just so he could escape. Helk vaguely remembered and knew he had witnessed their deaths while half-conscious. Although mocked by the two hunters, he couldn't argue because it was true that he couldn't do anything while his teammates were fighting. What was the use of the strength to fight hundreds of monsters when he couldn't protect the person he cherished? But then he heard a rumor that his teammates were still imprisoned, waiting for the day of public execution. Knowing he still had a chance, he became energized again and immediately set out. In the past, when Helk was recruited by Alicia into the team, she always saw Helk as a person ready to help his teammates and never gloomy even once. His face was always smiling and brought positive energy to everyone. At this point, Helk had returned to the capital and was being hunted by warriors there for bounty. But he didn't care and swiftly knocked away all those who blocked his path back. While running back, he recalled what had happened while he was unconscious, that all of his teammates had chosen to stay and fight to the end to buy time for him to escape. Zell had asked the young man in the white cloak to find Helk and apologize on his behalf for letting things come to this. Helk's wound had reopened, but he still pressed on, and facing him were the awakened warriors with their commander. Helk confidently charged at the commander, who was quite fast and fought back. He allowed the commander to strike his wound and then grabbed his head to deliver a blow. The guy wasn't down yet and turned back to continue fighting. As he fought, Helk remembered how Alicia had stayed by his side until the end, so he couldn't give up. In the end, he alone slaughtered all those awakened warriors. They were wiped out, and Helk continued on. At this time, Alicia was about to be publicly executed. The commander, who had been defied by her before, was still bitter about that incident and was eager to watch her execution. He asked her how she felt being cursed by the people she once saved, and that soon, her teammates would follow her. She wanted to beg for her teammates, but it was meaningless. However, just as they were about to act, the executioner's strike went askew because he sensed a great pressure choking him. It was the dark and overwhelming dominance that Helk emitted, which had spread all the way here. And at this moment, he had also arrived at the gates of the execution ground. Everyone could only cower in fear before his dominance. He grabbed the commander's head and asked if he was the one who had harmed his teammates. The commander blamed the citizens, while the citizens, out of fear, blamed him. Helk, enraged by this scene, threw the commander away and then rescued Alicia. He wanted to take her to the demon realm to start a new life with everyone. But Ami's father had found them and admitted that Helk was indeed beyond their imagination. He had won in finding hope, but had also lost by returning here. A snow curtain appeared, and he informed them that the transformation spell devised by the great sage had begun, and that Kless had died meaninglessly without being able to stop this spell. People began to transform, and he explained that unlike Helk and Kless, who awakened naturally, this forced awakening would cause people's bodies to be unable to adapt, leading to drastic physical changes but loss of reason. Alicia also began showing signs, leaving Helk at a loss for what to do. He couldn't shield her, but soon this snow curtain would cover all the citizens of the kingdom and turn them into puppets of the king. He advised Helk to leave if he didn't want to fight his old comrades. Helk carried Alicia and ran, trying to find a place the snow couldn't reach, but she said it was too late and Helk should leave her behind and run. Helk didn't want that to happen, but Alicia had already started transforming. She didn't want Helk to see her ugly transformed form, so she asked him to use the broken sword to end her life, but he refused. He only wanted her to live, so even if she transformed and became his enemy, he would accept it, as long as he could see her alive. She worried that Helk wouldn't recognize her when she transformed, but he believed that no matter what, he would always recognize her, so he begged her not to give up so easily. Alicia accepted Helk's wish and asked him to smile because she loved his smile, and if they ever met again, she wanted him to smile for her once more. Now, he thinks back that he was truly selfish for not ending Alicia's life then. Ami's father also thought he was foolish for not doing what Alicia wished. Later, he also met Zell in human form, but although Zell retained his mind and shape, he had become immersed in power and lost his former kind nature. After that, he met Zell again in human form. But although Zell retained his mind and shape, he was overwhelmed by power and lost his former good nature. Vermi thought that if they could kill the king, they could deal with the heroes, but Helk had of course thought of that. He had met the great sage again, who revealed that the awakened ones needed the king's manipulation ability to control them. If the king died, those brainless warriors would only go berserk, killing and slaughtering everything. Helk angrily rushed to punch the sage, but it was useless as he constantly dodged. He also informed that Kless wasn't dead but in a vegetative state, because the broken sword at that time hadn't completely killed Kless, so he was able to save him and let Kless nurture those disgusting things down there. Helk then angrily unleashed all his strength and a single air slash took away half of the sage's body. But he was still alive, and knowing Helk was still a great threat, he created a teleportation spell and sent him far away. That's how he arrived in the demon world. He was very disappointed that he couldn't save anyone. Vermi wasn't sure if he could fight against his old comrades, but Helk believed that he was fighting not only to exterminate humans, but also to protect the demon people. When he was lost here, Ken was the one who found him and brought him to his town. The people there treated him well even though they knew he was the brother of the hero who killed the Demon King. Vermi understood the second reason that helped him fight, so he once again handed her the sword and asked her for a favor. He said that when he gets angry and loses control, he won't be able to distinguish between friend and foe, so he wants Vermi to use the holy sword to end him if he loses control too much and harms the demon side. He originally intended to give it to Azura, thinking a heavenly king like Azura would be more trustworthy, but now he only has Vermi by his side. She decided to stand up and reveal her true identity as one of the heavenly kings, and she accepted the broken sword and advised him not to fight with the mindset of dying, but to fight with the mindset of surviving and overcoming. Helk then cheered up. Now we meet a girl named Harpy. She's part of the search team sent by Azura. Vermi's group has now boarded a train to return quickly, and the train soon arrived and picked up the whole group. Along the way, Helk and Vermi were playing cards while Pee-wee curiously went up to the driver's room. Pee-wee accidentally met the Harpy girl and they greeted each other. Not long after, when they were near a town, Vermi incinerated a rather strong monster that was causing havoc around here. Pee-wee picked up a stone that fell from the monster and then continued on. The three of them later met an old man who was the mayor. He informed them that recently there was a terrifying monster and everyone who faced it had failed. He had hired some final warriors and tomorrow they would come to deal with the monster, so if the two still wanted to keep their lives, they should leave early. But Vermi said she had already dealt with it. He didn't believe her and thought she was fooling this old man. But the warriors passing by all told him that the monster was dead, so the whole town threw a party. While Vermi's group was enjoying the party, Harpy had found her way here and revealed that because of that monster, only she from the search team had managed to arrive. Hearing that Azura's side was still okay, Vermi felt somewhat relieved. Vermi knew that now Harpy could only take her and Pee-wee back, not Helk, but surely Azura had anticipated this. Harpy took out the letter that Azura sent and he wanted both of them to go attack the southern castle. Azura had now told Han to have people fight defensively because they weren't the ones who would deal with the king. The ones bearing that heavy responsibility would be that unfortunate couple. The awakened warriors came again to attack the demon army and were repeatedly beaten. Ken wanted the two sides to reconcile, but Eddie refused because he hated those talkative guys. But Hyuga entered the battle and said that she also hated talkative guys like Ken, but what she hated more was the kind that always made excuses for their shortcomings and weaklings like Eddie here. She once again cut off Eddie's wings, but the archer behind shot Eddie dead so he could revive quickly. At this moment, Han is not sure about Azura's plan, as no one knows when they will find Vermi and whether Helk will still follow her or not. But Azura has anticipated every contingency plan, and partly because he wants to maintain this status quo to gather more information, as he senses there is someone with power comparable to Helk on the human army's side, and only that person could defeat the sacrificed general of this castle. For now, they need to wait for information from Asta's side. She reports that this reconnaissance is quite easy. The castle is full of escape routes without surveillance. The market is full of long-lasting preserved food for her to choose from, and the guards are so lax they might as well not be there. However, gathering intelligence is difficult because there are few people she can talk to. She then went for a walk in an alley and discovered someone coming, so she hid in a nearby corner. Eddie's group was passing by and discussing strategy for their next attack. But after a while, the woman with the bow suddenly became suspicious and told everyone not to casually reveal their strategy. The cloaked man got excited and threatened to burn down the entire area, forcing Asta to quickly escape. She had crawled away, and when she heard him say he was joking, she let her guard down, But then fire was actually thrown, forcing her to back away and fall down to where Kless was being taken to nurture eggs. She fell on this pile, so she wasn't injured, but soldiers came searching, forcing her to crawl into a nearby hole. She then went down into the sewer and used night vision goggles to find a way out. She sensed a bit of wind and realized there was a secret room in the wall, so she opened it. She then found a room with quite a few records kept there, so she planned to use it as a hideout sometime. Aiste then left and went out into the hallway. Soldiers were coming, and she couldn't find a way to open the door again. But luckily these soldiers were quite clumsy, so she easily slipped through their blind spots and escaped. She then got stuck in a hallway with people coming from both sides. She quickly hid on the ceiling. Ami's father passed by and noticed Aiste but did nothing. So Aiste escaped out the window and used iron claws to climb on the wall. Wherever she went, soldiers came, so she couldn't get in anywhere. And then when the soldiers outside were about to find her, she was forced to slip into an empty room. But right after that she was discovered by Ami. Ami thought she was a boy and asked how she got in here. Aiste lied that she was a foreigner and got lost here. Aiste was about to leave when Ami wanted her to stay because she was always confined here and could only talk to her father. Right after that, someone brought snacks, so Ami hid Aiste and received the food from the soldiers. She then realized Aiste was female and wondered why Aiste had come here. Aiste also didn't understand why Ami was so carefree, as if she didn't know there was a war going on outside. Aiste then asked Ami for a cup of coffee because she needed coffee to activate telepathy. Aiste then heard the story and was shocked to the point of falling backwards because her sister was too reckless. But anyway, Aiste still seemed to trust Ami because she noticed Ami quite liked to chat and she might be able to get some information from Ami. Aiste said she would contact again when she had more information and then disconnected. Vermi has now found the two remaining people in the search team and asked them to report back to Azura and remind him to be careful with the humans because they are not easy to deal with now. Zell's group is now attacking a castle of another demon lord general. Although they were attacked by surprise, this castle was originally very well guarded, so it could easily deal with unexpected events, so ambushing them was ridiculous. Their soldiers are all elite troops, so they won't lose to humans. But Zell is confident that the human army has a way to deal with it. And right after that, urgent news came about a herd of monsters in the south, rushing towards them with 30,000 creatures, and there were even New World monsters. The northwest also had monsters appearing with 50,000 in number, so the general realized these monsters were lured here by humans. But not quite, because Zell revealed that humans had found a way to create monster nests, and monsters would attack places with strong magic like these castles with anti-poison barriers. The general couldn't believe that humans could master such high-level magic. Years ago, when Kless went to defeat the Demon King, Zell tried his best to follow. Zell encountered the High Priest, who thought they would only get in Kless's way if they went to him now. But Zell was ready to sacrifice himself to help Kless, so the priest showed Zell something he had just created. He revealed that he had created a forbidden spell, and then casually summoned a monster. Now, back to the present, Zell had to admit that this castle's army was indeed very strong, still not breaking formation despite fighting tens of thousands of monsters like this, but this was their opportunity. However, at that moment, a barrage of arrows rained down on them, and the one who ordered this rain of arrows was Azura. The human army didn't anticipate this, so now was the chance for the demon army to counterattack. That general declared that the human army should prepare to be punished along with the monsters. However, Zell revealed that this was their intention all along. They deliberately lured Azura here so that the Great Sage could take troops to attack the castle that Azura's group had struggled to recapture and defend for so long. The absence of the four heavenly kings made the castle more vulnerable than ever. One by one, the most elite warriors of this place were defeated. The bald man could only cast a few barrier spells, so he was easily overwhelmed by the Great Sage. Just as he was thinking this attack was too easy, Hyuga appeared and gave him a cut on his face. He thought she couldn't win against him alone, but he never know until he try. He continuously shot lightning at Hyuga, but she dodged quite well. However, when she was about to attack, he circled behind her and knocked her down with a palm strike. But she bounced back and took one of his arms. He admitted she was different from the soldiers out there, so he would take her seriously. He then drew his sword to fight, and even though his arm was cut off, he could regrow it. But Hyuga didn't expect that he could regenerate his sword too, so she lost an arm to him. Eddie, who was fighting others at the time, heard that Hyuga was here and ran to find her. She was now exhausted, and the great sage knew her healing ability was due to using stored energy in her body to regenerate. Of course, his was similar, but he was still full of energy while Hyuga was worn out. Eddie rushed out to fight Hyuga so that the great sage could focus on his original goal of getting the barrier stone. He had now entered and was about to touch the barrier stone when Azura's tree roots suddenly appeared. He had been here all along waiting for him to come. On Zell's side, the Azura there was just a fake. Everyone had been led by the nose by Azura, but he knew someone even more cunning and deceitful than him, and that was this great sage. He could use the teleportation magic of the New World, and was also the one who had finished off the Demon King and the general who had protected this castle until his last breath. He admitted Azura was right and thought those two were fools for calling for peace even when they were about to die. Azura wasn't intimidated by him as he attacked with tree roots and then caught the rhythm of his teleportation to grab his legs. He threw a spear, but the sage teleported away and shot magic at him. Azura easily caught it and threw it back at him, making him look abnormal now. He thought that even if Azura killed him, he would resurrect, but don't try to outsmart Azura. He knew very well that if he had such an easy resurrection ability, he would have revealed himself earlier. Moreover, if what he said was true, when he realized this was a trap, he would have found a way to die to escape. But don't worry, he wouldn't kill him quickly, but would beat him half to death and then imprison him for interrogation. He saw that Azura was not the same as before. He knew about a glorious time of Azura, a time when 10 human kingdoms and the Demon Empire were constantly at war. There was a sword-wielding man who was the nightmare of all humanity, personally skewering 10 heroes. Yes, that was Azura. Of course, he wouldn't remember him, because at that time he was just one of the 100,000 mixed-race soldiers that Azura mercilessly slaughtered. But he remembered Azura's image very clearly. The fear of Azura had eaten into his mind at that time, and he could only bow his head in fear and play dead, waiting for Azura to leave. Many people had also pretended to die, but then succumbed to the poison of the demon realm. But he was fortunate to awaken and adapt to the poison, and now he can live eternally. However, his ultimate goal is not to take revenge on Azura, but to create a new world. Azura knows he intends to exterminate almost all species, and he also reveals that he has lived for over 1,000 years and explored many things just to face Azura once again. He originally knew this was a trap, but still entered to overcome his fear of Azura, and now he believes he is stronger than Azura. Azura has changed his mind and no longer wishes to capture and interrogate him. He will deal with him right here. Returning to the fateful battle between Hyuga and Eddie, Eddie has always been the one getting beaten, so today he feels uncomfortable being able to fight with such an advantage against her. But she still thinks Eddie hasn't gotten any stronger at all. Even though she's injured like this, he still can't gain much advantage over her. After countless defeats, Eddie has become addicted and desires to compete with Hyuga forever. When he spouts some misunderstood words that sound like flirting, Eddie suddenly shows a shy and bashful attitude similar to young people newly in love, leaving Hyuga frozen and confused. Somehow, Eddie has started to regain his personal emotions instead of blindly following the king's orders to exterminate demons. He has changed his personality and seems to have returned to his former self, proving that escaping the king's control spell is entirely possible. Returning to the conversation aimed at extracting information from Estelle, she had bluntly stated that she wanted an audience with the king, so she needed to know some information about him. Although instructed not to reveal anything related to the king, Ami still promised to show his location on the condition that Estelle would take her along, as she was tired of being confined to her room day after day. Despite being an old acquaintance of the two brothers, Ami knew nothing about what had happened, including the fact that humans had awakened and mostly lost their humanity, or about the war with the demon race. Because she knew nothing, Ami always felt uneasy. She sincerely hoped to go out and eat with Kless and Helk like in the old days. Seeing Ami so pitiful, Estelle was moved and promised to take her to meet Helk later to eat the delicious food he cooks. For now, Estelle will lead Ami to escape to the city below the castle. During their escape, Ami revealed her talent, not only with her supreme physical skills and ability to leap over walls, but also possessing a unique power. an ability only those who naturally awaken their power have the ability to disperse various types of power over a wide area through a snow screen. At this point, Asta also realized that the girl he was leading was certainly a crucial figure who would greatly influence the outcome of the battle with humans. Suddenly, as her consciousness began to blur, Ami wanted to return to her room. She started to not understand how she had come here. At the same time, someone was approaching, so Asta fled. By some bizarre chance, they accidentally arrived at the king's room. Immediately, he manipulated Ami and attacked the intruder, but Ami's father arrived and prevented the king from recklessly controlling his daughter. He also recognized Asta as the demon who had infiltrated the castle that he had sensed before. Knowing he was unlikely to escape this time, Asta desperately tried to assassinate the king, hoping to end everything. But with Ami's father present, Asta found it difficult to achieve his goal. She was easily subdued by the awakened warriors, and Ami's father warned her not to be foolish enough to kill the king, because awakened humans, once free from the king's control, would become creatures no different from monsters, only knowing how to kill madly. Indeed, when the king dies, it might halt the human country's advance, but it would create another danger far more terrible. In short, the demon realm is currently in a state of awaiting destruction, if not for one reason then for another. Returning to the battle between Azura and the Great Sage. Although he was beaten to a pulp countless times, somehow the sage still refused to die. To salvage the situation that was about to end in a disastrous defeat, he destroyed the talismans linking the king's control over the awakened warriors immediately, allowing them to evolve into monsters inheriting the power of the new world. If it were just a few monsters, they surely wouldn't be able to do anything to Azura, but all of the awakened warriors evolving was truly extremely difficult to deal with. He worried that while he was holding off the sage, the demon race army might not be able to withstand, so Azura ordered all troops to retreat to the castle first to avoid heavy losses. He alone would stay behind to handle all the New World monsters and that sage, but he was certain he would soon reach his limit. After the demon army left, the monsters also flooded to the area below the castle. The monster that almost took Hyuga's life was then intercepted by Eddie, who stepped in to save her. Eddie had truly developed feelings for her after countless competitions, so he didn't want Hyuga to lose her life. While observing the surroundings to wait for an opportunity to eliminate Azura, the sage discovered that Eddie had developed his mental strength to the point where he could resist the control spell. He broke into a sinister smile. As for Eddie, regaining his emotions had prevented him from evolving into a monster. Seeing his compatriots being exploited and turned into disgusting things made Eddie feel bitter. Knowing that Azura was still below the castle, Hyuga asked for a ride to his location. Being asked for help by the opponent he admired, Eddie was very willing to assist. However, once again, the sage suddenly appeared and attacked. Knowing full well that even if they joined forces, they would have no chance of defeating him, Eddie wanted Hyuga to leave first. The sage had long anticipated that this situation with Eddie would occur today, so he had specially prepared a contingency plan. It was a technique that erased mental strength. Unable to abandon the person who had just saved her life to be destroyed, Hyuga desperately tried to intervene but was then caught by him. With the remaining mental strength, Eddie strained himself to cut off the sage's arm to save her. Seizing the opportunity, Hyuga then skewered him into 100 pieces. The problem now was that Eddie was gradually falling into an uncontrolled state. While he still could, Eddie sent his apologies and hoped that Hyuga wouldn't die, and that surely one fine day Hulk would come to end everything. In a state of being completely consumed by power, Eddie flew away to carry out the manipulator's directive, which was to eliminate Azura, who was still busy with the out-of-control evolved warriors. Although he didn't achieve his initial goal, and even had to sacrifice the immortal warriors, the sage felt quite satisfied that he could defeat Azura, an obstacle blocking the way to the birth of his new world. The only remaining obstacle was Hulk, the awakened one with the strongest hero power. Although he couldn't defeat Hulk, he had countless underhanded schemes, so stopping him was all too simple. The pain and insecurity of mankind had long been in the palm of his hand. When having to eliminate his former comrades, Hulk would surely be overwhelmed by emotions. Returning to the adventure towards the human country of the Quartet of Circumstances, as they were increasingly approaching the land with many monsters, Harpy's scouting ability would be very useful. Because they would have to rely heavily on Harpy in the near future, She was always given priority to rest and recover. Vermi planned to go to a military base in the southern part of the human country to gather more resources. Both knew that if they joined forces, they would certainly be able to deal with the king. But the problem after that would be exterminating all the out-of-control warriors. Ahead lay a brutal battle waiting, and Vermi couldn't let Helk think he had to shoulder everything alone, so Vermi volunteered to handle the winged warriors and assigned to him the task of eliminating the king and the sage. Vermi did this essentially to prevent Helk from being emotionally shaken when confronting his old comrades. The next morning, at the base that Vermi's group was heading towards, they were ambushed by the winged army. Vermi's group still didn't know anything when suddenly a girl from the scout team was injured and flew in to report. The leader of that attack was Ami's father. He originally came here to find Helk, but unexpectedly found this demon race group. He ordered a massacre and to leave no survivors. Vermi suspected this advance was certainly aimed at Helk. Humans also feared him and wanted him to lose control and be pushed out of the battle. Vermi was also apprehensive that Helk would go berserk, but she still tried to keep a calm mind to lead him. And when she saw Helk ready to move forward, she believed he would be fine. That day, when Helk met Eddie again at that Demon King's castle, he also encountered the sage. That was why he took so long. As for him, he had now informed Ami's father that he was amazed by Azura's power because he had pushed him to this extent. But Helk was also a concern that needed more attention because his resentment would give him power many times greater than Azura's. He had appeared before Helk that time to risk taking some of his blood to stop a tracking technique similar to Azura's. Therefore, Ami's father knew the position to intercept Helk for the attack. Soon after, Helk and Vermi intercepted the army, and Helk stepped forward to face the uncle who had saved him and Kless years ago. The uncle said straight out that he came here to make Helk lose control and push him out of the fight, but if he gave up and returned, nothing would happen. He still believed that no matter what Helk did, there would be no peaceful future for him with his comrades. He should just go somewhere and live in seclusion for the rest of his life. No one would blame him and he wouldn't suffer anymore. But Helk was determined with his own desires, so he would confront his uncle with all the strength he had. His uncle had begun to declare war and ordered the soldiers to charge. Vermi had also joined in and wanted to reduce the burden on Helk. He then confidently let her support, and she went to face the uncle. The uncle knew that if he could deal with her, Helk would surely lose control again. She almost got hit, making Helk's heart skip a beat, but Vermi told him not to think about her losing. He knew well enough how strong she was, so he should focus on his own opponent. After saying that, she continued to summon fire demons to support the fight. The uncle didn't know who Vermi was that could easily calm Helk like that. Suddenly, an arrow flew past Vermi, but she realized it was aimed at Helk, so she warned him to be careful. He caught the arrow, and the person who shot that arrow must certainly be a familiar figure. She knew it was someone Helk knew, and the uncle had also ordered the warriors to target her. So she told Helk to take care of his business while she could handle herself. She continued to shoot fire to push back the warriors, and her instinct told her to back off because right after that, the uncle had intervened in the battle. Both fought while claiming to be the one who understood Helk best. Meanwhile, Helk had approached that girl. She had drawn out the broken sword and charged at him, and he just blocked it with a smile on his lips as he had promised. Yes, he recognized this was his Alicia. The uncle had informed Vermi that the black aura constantly pouring on the battlefield at this moment was Helk's despair and agony. The agony of having to kill the one he loved with his own hands. Helk had taken off his hat for Alicia and apologized for his selfishness that day. He would free her by ending everything. Helk had drawn his sword while Vermi tried to run over to stop Helk from taking action, but the uncle wouldn't let that happen. He thought she should let Helk end his own suffering by letting him take action and then lose control. But Vermi had rushed up and drawn the real holy sword to cut a slash on the uncle's face and pass by. The uncle realized Helk had handed over the sword to the demon race, but he had now calmed down. Vermi had approached and started to enlighten Helk. She wanted to rescue mankind with Helk, not exterminate them. Both Eddie and Alicia had shown signs of regaining their sense of self instead of losing control and losing themselves like Zell. She had successfully persuaded Helk, and now she could fight comfortably without any more worries. She believed the witch had advised her to make the right choice, and she believed this was her own choice. because if she helped Helk exterminate mankind, he would never be able to smile again. But if she helped him save them, Helk could cheer up, and it would also make her feel more at ease in her heart. The uncle thought her words were unrealistic because those warriors were beyond saving, but Vermi argued that there was no evidence they couldn't be healed. If it didn't work once, try many times. But he informed them both that the castle had fallen and Azura had sacrificed himself. While his army numbers kept regenerating, so did the demon side still have a chance of winning this war. However, Vermi said that Azura was as tough as nails, so he wouldn't die even in dreams. She had heard the news of Azura's death countless times, but each time he was still alive. If she didn't confirm it with her own eyes, she wouldn't believe Azura was dead. And indeed, Azura was still alive at this moment, so Vermi thought Helk didn't need to worry about Azura. The uncle had somewhat guessed Vermi's identity, while Helk had decided to step forward for a fight. But he turned back and left, believing that no matter how hard they tried, one day they would realize everything was meaningless. Vermi apologized for changing Helk's determination, but he wasn't sad and was even happy because she had rekindled his hope of saving everyone. The next morning, Azura had woken up, and on Vermi's side, they had sent someone back to report to Azura while she would go to the castle that had been attacked by Zell's army earlier. Azura had now heard from Ista that Vermi was safe and would return soon, and the details about their southern base being destroyed were written in the letter by Vermi. Azura was very pleased to see that Vermi wanted to save mankind. Meanwhile, Vermi's group had already had someone come to pick them up. She had asked how Azura was doing and learned that despite being covered in injuries, he was still alive and kicking, so she could rest assured. Vermi and Helk were completely at ease, so both could go to the Demon King's castle safely. Helk's journey is still ongoing, but will be in part 2 to be released in the future. For now, goodbye and see you again.